I see all spiritual teachings as, they're really strategies. They're strategies for awakening. Ideally, that's what they are. Otherwise, we think that they are statements of truth or that the teaching itself contains the reality, which it really can't. It's all a pointer, which is one of the wonderful things and important things I learned in Zen. There's that old ancient teaching of not to mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. And so the pointing is sort of, in a certain sense, it's a strategy to help awaken. Now, if somebody's struggling and they're really striving and they're really all tied up, then a teaching that tells you there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to attain, as it might hit you in a certain way. It might kind of put something between that searching and your own struggle. In other words, it might cause a gap. If it causes a gap in the struggling, then maybe reality comes in. But if we take it just in and of itself, there's nothing to seek, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. It's like, well, that's relatively true. It's close to as a pointer. But some people seem to not have to struggle, others seem to have to struggle. And the problem is if we put a teaching, if we impose a teaching upon our experience, then the teaching starts to take.
Part of it is the philosophy of science. There are the philosophers of science. And the philosophers of science in the last few decades were more from the postmodern philosophy. And the postmodern philosophy, even though some of them believe they express some spiritual understanding, they really negate the spiritual more than anything else. Now, scientists are not listening to the philosopher of science anyway, because the postmodern philosopher, they developing their philosophy, the scientists themselves are still working from the perspective of Locke and Hume and all those people from a century or two ago. They're not up with their philosophy. So I think that's one link that's not happening, that many of our academic institutions, the Department of Philosophy, are very much dominated by postmodern philosophy. Many people who are in that are trying to connect postmodern philosophy with spirituality one way or another. In my view, spiritual experience need to orient postmodern philosophy, not the other way around. Many people trying to do it the other way around. They're trying to use postmodern philosophy to look at spirituality instead of the other way around. I would like to do it that
Well, Roger Penrose and I have suggested that consciousness is a sequence of moments, each moment of consciousness being produced by a quantum self-collapse, an objective reduction. And what this means is that superposition, a quantum or an object being in two places at once, being in a quantum state of superposition, is actually a separation in underlying space-time geometry. So a particle over here and a particle over here is actually curvature in this direction and curvature in that direction of the fundamental level of the universe at the Planck scale. And the multiple worlds view or hypothesis would say that each of these curvatures continues to branch off and form a whole new universe. So we have an infinite number of multiple overlapping coexisting universes. But Penrose says that these separations in the universe, in the fabric of space-time geometry, are unstable. And after a time, T will pop or collapse to one or the other. And each time one of these self-collapses occurs, or objective reductions, that is, reductions due to an objective threshold, there's a moment of consciousness. There's a moment of conscious awareness. And depending on how quickly it collapses and how big is the separation, will determine the time it collapses and also the intensity of the experience. So it's like photons. It's like quantum. You know, a photon can be very low energy, a long wavelength, low frequency, or it can be very high energy, high frequency, short wavelength. So an ultraviolet photon is very intense, whereas an infrared photon is less intense. And I think we have a sequence of conscious moments like this. So we can be, if we're meditating or in an altered state, we go from